Hello, it's Jewel for Monday's Admissions from the Heart. On our last Monday of August, next week we'll be into September and approaching the clock that tells us on the calendar, regardless what the weather says, is that we'll be um, walking into fall. Right now, today it is just a little chilly. The temperatures are starting to drop. I had to actually put a jacket on. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, here we go. Fall is coming. Anyway, so over the weekend, girlfriend and I had an overnighter. We had planned it for a couple months. We had an overnighter, and the first night we got there, all we did was when we first checked in, after we checked in, put our bags down, did her bed check, because I always tell you, if you're going to be in a hotel, I don't care how luxurious the location is, you always have to do a bed check, meaning and making sure that there's no bed bugs or anything in the bed. And then I spray the bed with this bug-free type product. It's a spray. But anyway, so you could hear about more of that on travel, and for some reason I don't even know why that popped in here, because I'm thinking, well, I'm talking about that. That is not why this video is supposed to be about, but I guess God wanted you to hear that. If you need more info about when you're traveling, always check the bed. I don't care who you go see, because Disney already had a lawsuit with bed bugs. So, Disney got bed bugs. Bed bugs don't discriminate. Anyway, so we went on this overnight after we did all that, get in and check the beds and everything. We just went out on their pool deck and just chilled and sat for quite a few number of hours, just sitting there watching Lake Erie and what was going on there, because we even saw an otter. So like, man, how do I say an otter on Lake Erie? So we saw an otter, just watching nature go by, whatever. before lunch, before dinner, and then we went to dinner, came back, and just finished the rest of the day sitting out there on that deck to now waiting for the sunset, and it still was about a good 2-3 hours away. So who knows, maybe it was a good 6 hours. We just sat chilling on a deck, on a sun deck. So when the sun deck had a lot of places where you can get shade, so it wasn't like we sat totally in the sun that whole time. Sometimes we're in the sun, sometimes we're in the shade. It just depends on how we kept moving around, because they had different chairs. They had rocking chairs, they had tables with chairs, they had lounge chairs. So we could probably take advantage of a lot of stuff they had there, and watching other people, watching kids in the swimming pool and listening to their conversations as they played. And then other people in the pool listening to their conversations and what they had to talk about. So with us, we talked about all kind of stuff. All kind of stuff. That's a lot of time to sit there and talk about a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. And then there were times we just sat there and say nothing. We both in our own heads thinking whatever. We're doing whatever. So I know I have a phone, so I was doing a couple of phone things. My friend is not a phone techie person at all. So she was definitely sitting there silent and definitely in her own head. So I did a combination of electronic stuff on the phone, whatever that was, and taking pictures, of course, because I had my phone and my camera. So I was taking pictures of the lake, and then eventually we got to do the sunset. So I got a ton of pictures of the sunset. So what was interesting about that, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours, because I don't remember without actually looking at the time we did this and guessing, but say 4 to 6 hours with a break of dinner in the middle of just chilling, sitting outside, enjoying the wonderful weather. It wasn't even too hot. So it was even better, good too, because if it had been too hot, we probably couldn't have sat out there too long. Our hotel room was freezing like normally. So it took us a minute to get that cool down. So we needed to be outside anyway to let our room cool down, or rather warm up. So that was interesting, because that was definitely not a part of my plan. I don't even know what my plan was for the weekend, other than the reason why we went up there, which has nothing to do with this topic. But I wasn't planning on us sitting out there for that number of hours, literally doing nothing, just sitting there chit-chatting, or sitting there, not chit-chatting, it's just depending on how it rolled. But it was just, oh man, a different kind of relaxation, just sitting there watching nature, watching God's, can we say ocean, watching his lake, watching his world, and just communing with each other and just talking about whatever. So that was really wonderful. What I liked about that is it reminded me that, okay, we always need rest. We do need rest. A lot of times we'll think about resting as, okay, I need to separate myself from the rest of the world. Let me go sit over here and chill, read a book. But I don't know what that looks like, real rest. Sitting down and just letting your heart rate slow down, whatever, But resting with a friend is wonderful. It's so much more better to rest with a friend than to rest alone. Sometimes you do have to rest alone because you're really not resting alone. You're resting alone with God. But I'm just saying, resting with a friend like that, because I had never really done something like that. I've had something close with my girlfriend when we went on this recent cruise, because we did a lot of just laying around a cruise ship and everything, but not those kind of hours back to back, because if we did do that during the day, it probably was an hour over here in this place, and then we went over to that deck, and we was all over the place, but we still was walking in between all those unbroken rest points. So to just stay in the same space for that number of time with a friend, talking, and then not feeling uncomfortable with the silence, because a lot of people cannot handle the silence. It's one thing to have silence when you're by yourself. Okay, you expect that. But some people, when they're together with other people, it just drives them crazy. Like they have to talk. They have to say something. They got to have music. They got to have something, that they're not comfortable with the silence with other people. So, silence is good, because it's not like you have to keep on talking, keep some kind of sound going, keep some conversation going. So that's what made it so good about our conversation, because the conversation we had was interesting, deep, and different, because I got to know more about her. She got to know more about me, because I usually visit her every month, but I don't stay overnight with her, because when you stay overnight with somebody, then you can start getting a little more in depth with somebody in their personalities that maybe you can't see in a couple hours. So that was really good to see this person in a different light and to hear some of her comments that I hadn't heard, even though I've been knowing her for quite a number of years. So to sit and talk about those things, and then sometimes, and then just sit there quietly in her own heads, either pondering about, because I don't know what she's reading. I mean, she should be, I can't read her mind, pondering about what we just said, or pondering about, okay, when I leave tomorrow, I'm gonna da 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 da. I don't know, but I'm just saying, it was different resting with a friend. So it reminded me, okay, I need to do this more often, rest with a friend. I don't know how that needs to happen. Granted, it can only happen in a longer setting, like an overnighter or trip or something you guys just planned. Okay, we're going to hang out together for 6 hours and do this thing and rest with a friend. So, because God wants us in community, He does not want any of us alone. He wants us all in His one body, tied together, interacted with each other, involved with each other's life, all that kind of stuff. Because being separated, being alone, I mean really alone, being alone with God is necessary for you personally every now and then. But to be alone almost like 24/7. So anybody that's single would have to really do something more active to make sure they're not alone. And this is going to be someone that's living alone. They don't have roommates, that kind of stuff. To do something to not dwell on being alone. Some people will do that, and I hope they're okay. But some of the friends I do know that are by themselves, they're not doing very well being alone. So being alone is not good for your health. I mean, 24/7 all the time being alone, because God made us to be in community. He makes us to want to be together, even if being together or with flawed people, because they are flawed. Just because there's no perfect person out there. There's no way you can find a person that's like, okay, I'll hang with them because they're so wonderful. Yeah, they may be wonderful, but that other person, that really, really flawed person, might be the one you need to be hanging with unless they're doing something sinful. So that's a whole nother level. You're not trying to go there. You're going with people that you spiritually need to be with. And God will make that real clear because all you do is pray about it. Okay, who should I be with on a regular basis, and who should I maybe not be with on a regular basis? And if not, what's the reason for that? I mean, what's the reason for that? What's the reason for that? I mean, most things you already know, but a lot of times we just don't want to accept or deal with the issues of why we should or should not be with XYZ. But communing, resting with a friend is good. And hope you guys get a chance to do that because it's so good and deep that I can't even go into the deep and wide what we talked about because that's not something that I need to tell you about. Only you can deal with that when you deal with that friend where you're alone, where you get to talk about some stuff and you get to be quiet and just meditate on something else. Yes, that time together, you want to sometimes maybe have some time of prayer, have some time of worship, some time of reading about the word, the Bible, that kind of stuff. The conversation probably always lean that way. At least for me it does. I just know that somehow God will come into the picture. Something will happen like, oh wow, there's God right there. Whatever's going on. It just happens. But it's not like it's a mandatory thing. It's just the fact of being together and knowing that God is there because He's the third person sitting there with you as you're talking about whatever. And it could be really yucky stuff. Then it could be really not so yucky stuff. It could be just crazy stuff like, why did I say that? Where did that come from? Like, seriously? I was thinking about that, but it came out. So, yeah, then when I do some walking with people, stuff come out. I'm like, man, I wasn't planning on doing that, talking about that, but something about the adrenaline rush when you walk make you say stuff, and it's usually stuff that needs to be said for whatever the reason that is. So like I said, God made us to be in communion with people. So I'm trying to keep this short. I can already tell I'm going way over. So let's just give you just a couple of scriptures here. Let's start with the first one. Both of them in Hebrews 10, 24 to 25. Let us consider how we may spur one another toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And that day is coming soon. Got to get ready. And then we got Hebrews 3:13. It says, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. It is extremely encouraging to be with somebody in a space together, and you chose to be there together. It wasn't randomly, I just fell into each other's lap. So just being together is a real huge source of encouragement. So let's just do that. Always think of ways that we can always be encouraging, just with people in general, whether they're in church or not in church. But to always think about, let's not be selfish in wanting our own time alone. I don't even know what that looks like for some, because what that looks like. But some people, they are alone and they're lonely, because you can be lonely in a crowd. But to be lonely and you're really lonely, bored with life and everything, because we already know by yourself the phrase about idle mind, devil's workshop. Because if you're by yourself, you can come up with all kinds of things you could be doing that you shouldn't be doing, but you do it anyway because you had nothing else. Because your mind says, well, whatever. So if you're with somebody else, maybe you won't lean towards that idle mind, devil's workshop. Maybe you'll ask the question, hey, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? And then you go, oh yeah, I think blah, blah, blah. Instead of, if you're by yourself, telling where that'll go, especially if you're by yourself a lot. It's one thing to be alone intentionally, to separate yourself from the crowd, to be with God. That's good. We need that all the time to strengthen our love and relationship with God. But to be alone, intentionally alone, is not good for our health. It's not good for our relationship with God, because He wants us to commune with each other with Him, not you by yourself. You'll eventually be tossed out somewhere because you're not really connected with the vine. So make every effort to get some rest with a friend. See you next month.